Why are the leaves on my plant turning yellow? That's probably the question that's got you to this video. And in the video, I'm going to answer that question by covering everything from environment all the way through to nutrients. And I'm even going to include diagrams of leaves to show you how the different nutrient deficiencies could show up in your plants. Now this covers everything from indoor plants to landscaping plants. So you will find the answer to your question, why are my plant leaves turning yellow? Now the first thing we're going to say is that the scientific term for the yellowing of plant leaves is called chlorosis, and that indicates it's something to do with the chlorophyll inside of plants. Now if we remember at school, plants need chlorophyll to photosynthesize, and that chlorophyll is green in colour. So all the symptoms we're going to look at today are showing that something's up with that chlorophyll, because if it can't photosynthesize, it cannot feed itself, and you're going to have an unhappy and potentially dead plant. Now I'm going to talk through the things I suggest you check in the order I suggest you check them. And if you follow this plan, you're going to be able to find the problem with your plant and understand how to fix the yellow leaves and stop it from progressing any further. So if your plant is developing yellow leaves, the very first thing that I'd recommend you check is its environment. An environment is a broad term that covers three things. That's light, temperature, and humidity. Now, so often, especially with houseplants, the plants will look fantastic in the houseplant shop. And then as you get it home, it just seems to look worse and worse every day with more and more yellow leaves. And that's because of something called abiotic stress, meaning stress of the environment outside of the plant. Now, how can we fix this? So with light, tropical understory plants, like the majority of houseplants, like bright indirect light. So if you've got it in a really sunny windowsill, they're going to become stressed. And as they become stressed, they drop leaves. And the first sign that a leaf is going to be dropped is they start withdrawing the chlorophyll from the leaves, so it turns yellow. Find the sweet spot in your house or in your apartment or in your garden for your plants. Don't give them too much light. Now, some plants will do the same thing if they're not getting enough light. If you've got something that needs a higher light condition, brighter light condition, and you've got it somewhere pitch black, it too is going to start dropping leaves, and those leaves will turn yellow before dropping. So find somewhere with bright indirect light, and that's generally a good spot for the majority of houseplants. Garden plants, it's about learning what you're growing and finding the right conditions for them. Now with temperature, with houseplants, because they are tropical understory plants, they like a consistent and warm temperature. They hate temperature fluctuations. So if you've got it by a window pane, an air conditioning unit, or somewhere that's a bit breezy, it's going to have a cold draft coming around that plant, and it's going to have really warm daytime temperatures and then really cool nighttime temperatures, and that's going to put stress on the plant, which again could cause yellowing of the leaves. So move them away from window panes, and that's going to solve two things. That's going to give you then bright indirect light, but it's also going to have a more consistent ambient temperature further away from the window's glass. And the final thing is humidity. Now, specifically, we're talking about relative humidity, and that means the moisture that's suspended in the air around the plant. And again, being tropical understory plants, speaking about houseplants, they like quite high humidity because you've got to think about the rainforest. It's about knowing where these plants come from. So if you can provide high humidity, the leaves will be happy. Now, humidity doesn't really cause the yellowing of the leaves, but you'll get that brown crispy tips, and that's a sign of stress, and that could then lead to something that will cause the yellowing of leaves and the leaves to drop. So that is the three things to check for in regards to environment. If you're happy with everything in your plant's environment, then the next thing to check is your watering schedule. Now, there are two things that could cause yellowing of leaves with your watering, and that is firstly overwatering. Now, we know that plants need water to survive, but their roots also need oxygen. And if you overwater a plant, the soil in the pot or in the ground becomes waterlogged. And when it's waterlogged, those roots suffocate because they can't breathe oxygen. And when they suffocate, they shut down and they stop taking in water, which means they cannot distribute nutrients around the plant. When that happens, you then get the yellowing of plant leaves. So the way to fix that is to allow your soil to dry out between watering. And also check the potting medium in your pot. If you've got something that is just really waterlogged and will not dry out, you need to pot your plant into something and add a bit of perlite or grit, something that's going to open up that soil and aerate it a bit. The other watering problem is under-watering, and that's going to put your plant through drought stress. And it's going to have much the same effect, because if there isn't enough water in the soil, then the roots aren't uptaking water, and just as before, they can't distribute the nutrients around, so you're going to get yellow leaves. Now for me, a good watering schedule, and it varies from plant to plant, and this includes houseplants and garden plants, is to really thoroughly water a plant if it's in a pot, and let the water run through the bottom of the pot, and then leave it. And it can be up to 2 weeks. I allow the soil to dry out, and if the plant starts wilting, I will water again. But doing it that way means the soil is never consistently waterlogged, and those roots always get air. And this is going to help prevent the yellow leaves on your plants. Now, while we're talking about roots, you also need to consider whether a plant, if you're growing it in a container, is pot bound. So if a plant becomes pot bound, the container is just full of roots and there is no room for soil anymore. And if there's no soil, there's no ability for water or nutrient retention. So that causes nutrient deficiency in your plants. You need to pot it on into a bigger pot or a bigger container, and that's going to enable the roots to get into the soil. And that soil, or that compost, will hold water and hold nutrients long enough for the roots to be able to absorb them and distribute them around the plants. That will prevent the yellowing of leaves, but I've got one tip. If you are potting on your plants, only pot them into one size bigger. Don't be tempted to save yourself the effort of potting on 3 or 4 times and just going into a giant pot. Because if you do that, there is a chance that when you're watering, all of that extra compost or soil will stay waterlogged. And when it's waterlogged, you're going to go right back to that previous problem of the roots not being able to breathe. Whereas if you have a pot size that's just one size bigger than before, there is enough room there for the roots to grow and the plant to kind of uptake more nutrients, but not so much that you're going to get waterlogging. So if your plant still has yellow leaves and you've checked its environment and you've checked your watering schedule and you've checked that it's not pot bound, what else can you do to see why the leaves are turning yellow on your plants? The next step I'd recommend is checking your plant for pests. And by pests, I mean things like aphids, mites, scale insect, thrips. They can all put your plant through stress. And just as with all of the previous problems that I've mentioned, stress can cause the plant to withdraw chlorophyll, the leaves turn yellow and they will drop. Now with pests, a way to fix them, I use a neem oil spray. So neem comes from the neem tree and the oil is a really good natural insecticide. And I mix it 50-50 with water and a bit of Castile soap, and I'll just spray it onto the foliage of my plants. Now some plants are sensitive to leaf scorch from neem oil, so just test it on a small area at first. And that, for most pests, seems to do the trick for me. Now if your pests are something that's big enough that you can just manually take them off of the plant, then do that. That's going to be the best way and the least stress on the plant. Now, another problem that might cause the yellowing of leaves is viruses. And viruses often follow a pest infestation because those pests can spread viruses from plant to plant. Now, once your plant has a virus, you can't get rid of it. And some plants will happily grow and shrug off a virus, but others will get curled leaves and yellow markings all over them. I'd recommend at that point that you either grow it somewhere in quarantine where there are no other plants so that it cannot spread to the rest of your plants, or you destroy it, you get rid of it and you start again. Hopefully though, it's not as severe as that. Most times you're going to see some pests and you can pick them off. So next up, we're going to talk about nutrient deficiencies, and I've left this until close to the end of my list because if you've checked humidity, you've checked pests, you've checked that your watering schedule is good, you've checked that your plant's not pot bound, or I should say that the soil isn't compacted around the plant. If it's planted out in a landscaped garden, that's going to have the same effect as being pot bound. Then it's most likely going to be a nutrient deficiency. But I'd recommend checking all of those things first, because if you over fertilise your plant trying to fix a nutrient deficiency that isn't there, it's going to be detrimental to the health of your plant, and you're probably going to cause more yellow leaves, and we don't want that. So let's break down all the different nutrient deficiencies, and I will show you how they look on a leaf so that you know which one's which and then how to fix them. So the first nutrient deficiency that we're going to talk about that causes yellowing of leaves on your plants is a nitrogen deficiency. Now, what is nitrogen? Nitrogen is an essential macronutrient for plants, and it's especially needed by big leafy foliage plants. Now, a nitrogen deficiency shows up on your leaves as general yellowing across the leaf, across the whole leaf. And it starts on older leaves, and it will slowly move its way out from the inside of a shrub or along a vine to the newer leaves, but it will start with the older leaves. That is the key sign, general yellowing, starting with the older leaves. Now, if this is what you're seeing happening, you're likely got a nitrogen deficiency. So to fix this, you just need to fertilise little and often with a high nitrogen fertiliser. So when you buy fertilisers, you can see on the back of the pack, it says NPK. N stands for nitrogen, so you want that number to be high relative to the others. Now, don't be tempted just to start over-fertilising your plant to give it nitrogen. As I said, over-fertilising plants can be damaging and you're going to cause more yellow leaves. Just start fertilising little and often and you should see less and less yellow leaves starting to appear. The next deficiency that causes yellowing of leaves on plants is a potassium deficiency. Now, as with the nitrogen deficiency, it's going to start with older leaves and then slowly move out to the younger leaves. And with potassium, it's the outside edges of the leaves that turn yellow first, while the centre remains green. And those edges will eventually turn brown. So that is the key signs to look out for with a potassium deficiency. So how do you fix this? You can get a high potassium fertiliser, that's the P in the NPK part of the fertilisers, or you can use homemade compost that was made with a lot of food byproducts, because food, that's vegetables and fruit, are high in potassium. So if you're making your own compost or compost tea and you're composting that sort of food byproduct, then that's going to be high in potassium. And again, I would just use that as a dilute fertiliser or add compost if it's in your garden plants, and that's going to add the extra potassium that the plants need over time. Now, something else that can cause your plant leaves to turn yellow is a magnesium deficiency, and the way that you can recognise that in the leaves of your plants is that the yellowing starts in the centre of the leaf and it will slowly move its way out to the edges. The leaf veins all stay green. Now, this will also start with older leaves first. That's going to be the telltale sign. If the yellowing starts in the centre of the leaf on older leaves and the leaf veins are still green, it's likely a magnesium deficiency. So how do you fix this to stop getting more and more yellow leaves on your plants? Now, to add magnesium to your soil so that the plant can uptake everything that it's missing, you can use Epsom salts, which you just dilute into water or sprinkle around the base of the plant, but just do it little and often. I can't repeat this enough. Don't over-fertilise your plants, because it's going to be so counterproductive when we're trying to solve the issue of having yellow leaves. Now, another deficiency that shows up very similarly to magnesium deficient leaves is an iron deficiency, because it has the same yellowing of the leaf with the green leaf veins remaining. But unlike with magnesium, which shows up on the older leaves, an iron deficiency will show as yellowing leaves on the younger leaves, on the growing tips of the plant. And that's because iron is a substance that plants can't move around within the plant structure. So when the plant becomes deficient, it's going to be the new growing points that show it first. Now, how do we fix this? With iron, it's pretty ubiquitous. So if you're fertilizing your plant well, your houseplant or your garden plants, there's likely to be iron in the soil, but the problem's going to be that the plant can't access it. And there's two common reasons why plants can't access iron. First up is if the pH is too high. Plants can uptake more nutrients healthily and minerals healthily when the pH is neutral to slightly acidic. If it's too high, the plants aren't going to be able to access iron. So you can just amend the soil to fix that. Now, another issue that can prevent the uptake of iron is if there is too much phosphorus present in your soil. And that's probably going to have happened if you've been fertilizing with something that is very, very high in phosphorus. And phosphorus is actually a blocker for iron uptake. So it's just checking that you're fertilizing with the right sort of fertilizer to get that soil balance back so that the plant can access everything that it needs. Now, soil pH is something we've touched on a couple of times there. And plants, as I say, thrive from neutral to slightly acidic soil. In that range, they can uptake most nutrients and minerals. But it's not the same for all plants. There are things that love to grow in ericaceous or acidic soil, things like rhododendrons and camellias. Now, it all depends what you're growing, and you get to know what it likes, and then you can create the perfect soil conditions for it. If you're unsure of the pH of the soil in your garden, and if you want to know if it needs amending and if that's causing the yellowing of leaves, you can buy a soil testing kit, and I'll leave a link in the description below where you can find everything you need, including everything that I've mentioned before now that will help you amend the soil and stop your plants developing yellow leaves or leaves with brown marks. Hopefully this list of reasons as to why your plant might be growing yellow leaves has given you insight, and you can look at your plants now and see how to fix the problem of yellow leaves. Now, my name's Craig and my channel is all about growing tropical, exotic and weird and wonderful plants. And if you found this video helpful, I would be massively grateful if you could hit subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. Please feel free to check out all my other videos and comment below if you've got any more tips or questions, and I will get back to you. Thank you again. I'll see you in the next one.